Samad Aleph, right on the top of the Yoma, the Gemara explains here the Mishnah where it says that during the 7 days, so the Kohen Gadol was separated in his room and they gave him to the Ziknei Kohuna, and then they brought him to the Beis Haftinis, and over there, what did they do with him in the Beis Haftinis? So the Gemara will explain here. Tana, we learned in the Braisa, Lelamdei Chafina. They taught him there how the Ketores is done on Yom Kippur when it's brought into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which was, as the Gemara will explain later, was a very difficult Aveda. The Kohen had to walk in with a pan of coals in one hand and with the Ketores in another hand. And then inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he would place the pan of coals down on the floor. And then he would have to take 2 handfuls, which is what's called chafina. He takes a handful, v'chofan, from that Ketores that he's holding to place it down on the pan of coals. Problem is, he's holding it in one hand, and he has to somehow take 2 handfuls out of it. So he has to hold it with his teeth and take in a way that nothing spills to be able to put it on the pan. It was a difficult Aveda. We'll learn about it later. The Gemara will explain this. So in order for him to be able to do this Aveda correctly, they had to train him and teach him in those 7 days this chafina. Amar Rav Papa. Now the Gemara here is going to bring regarding the 2 rooms that actually the Kohen Gadol in this time period was in. Even though we learned until here that there was 1 room, but Amar Rav Papa, Shtei Lishkes Hayel LeKohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol actually had 2 rooms designated for him in these 7 days when he was preparing for Yom Kippur. Achas Lishkas Parhedrin, one which we spoke about already, which is Lishkas Parhedrin. That's the place where he lived, sort of. That was his dwelling. He slept there. And V'achas Lishkas Beis Haftinis, and one was the Lishkas Beis Haftinis, which he spent his time there during the day to practice his Aveda, and specifically this Aveda of the Ketores. Achas B'tzofen, one of these rooms was on the north side of the Azara, V'achas B'darim, and another one was on the south side of the Azara. Now the Gemara is going to bring the source of where we see that there were these 2 rooms, and one on the north and one on the south, and in order to bring the source of this, is going to bring a long union over here of the Mishnayos and Masechta Midas. Achas B'tzofin, so 1 room was on the Tzofin side, it's Nan, because we learned in the Mishnah of Midas. Vav Lishkes Haya Bazara. There were 6 different rooms, or 6 different chambers that were in the Azara. Gimel B'tzofin, 3 of them were on the Tzofin side, V'gimel B'darim, and 3 of them were on the Darim side of the Azara. Shebedarim, in the Darim side of the Azara, you had Lishkas HaMelach, chamber of salt, Lishkas HaParve, which was the name of a person, was called Lishkas HaParve, Lishkas HaMadichin, the room, the chamber where they washed out the parts of the karbonis. And as the Braisa here explains, Lishkas HaMelach, what is this? Shasham or Yunaisnan Melach LeKarbon. That's where they salted the carbon. Lishkas HaParve, Shasham or Yumelchin Eiris Kachim. That's where they would salt the hides of the animals in order to, when they were tanning it and they're working with it, so they would use the salt over there for the hides of the kachim. Valgaga, on the top, on the roof of this chamber, Haisa based Tfilu LeKohen Gadol, there was a mikveh there for the Kohen Gadol, B'Yoma Kippurim, that's where he taveled on Yom Kippur. As we'll see soon, the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur had to go to the mikveh 5 times, and he had to tavel in a place in the Azara, he wasn't allowed to go out, had to be in Kodesh. Ashi here brings the pasuk, B'Rochatzas B'Sarei B'Mayim B'Mokim Kodesh, it had to be in the Azara. Okay, and then there was the Lishkas HaMadichin. Right near it, there was a room, the chamber, Shasham Hoy Medichin Krave Kachim. That's where they would wash out the innards of the karbonis, of the kachim, that was brought in the Mizbeach. And also, Misham, in that room, there was also Misibe, a circular steps that was Oile Legag Beis HaParve, that went up to the rooftop of the Beis HaParve, which is where the mikveh was. Those are the rooms that were on the Darim side of the Azara. Gimel Shebetzafin, and then there were 3 rooms on the Tzafin side. Lishkas HaEitz, Lishkas HaGoyla, Lishkas HaGozis. And the Gemara, the Braisa now explains what these rooms were. Lishkas HaEitz, the room that's called the room of wood. So Omer Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Shachachti Ma'isa Mishameshes. I forgot what they used this room for. Abishal Omer, so Abishal came and explained, Lishkas Kohen Gadol Haisa. This Lishkas HaEitz, this was the room of the Kohen Gadol. And this is the Lishkas HaEitz is the same room that we also call the Lishkas Parhedrin. And this is the room that was on the north where the Kohen Gadol slept. And in those 7 days that he was separated. So then there was another 2 chambers over there that was behind both of them. The Lishkas Kohen Gadol, it was behind the other 2 rooms that were there, which is the Lishkas HaGoyla and the Lishkas HaGozis, which the Braisa will explain right now what they are. The Gag Shloshtan Shavet, there was 1 roof that went over all 3 of these chambers. What are the other 2 chambers that were there? Lishkas HaGoyla There was a room that was called the room of the people from the exile. Why was it called that? Sham haya boir. Over there was a big pit of water. Boir agayla, a pit that the people, when they came up from Galus and they built the Beis Hamikdash, so they dug this pit. Val galgal nasan olav, there was a wheel that was on it. And misham esap gemaim, and they would roll down a bucket to fill up water from there, right, up and down. L'chol azara, for everything that they needed in the azara. So that's why it was called Lishkas Hagayla. Then there was the Lishkas Hagazis there. So the Lishkas Hagazis was made from stone. Sham Haisa Sanhedrin Shal Yisrael Yesheves. That's the room where the Sanhedrin would sit with Dona Sakainim. And then one of the main things that the Sanhedrin would do would be to inspect and look at the Kainim to see if they're kosher or not. Umisha Nimtza by Psol, any Kain that came in and he was found to have a Psol, that he couldn't do the Aved in the Beis Hamikdash, Hayalovish Chayrim, he would dress in black clothing, or Misatev Chayrim, wrap himself in black clothing, V'yotza, and he went out of the Azara, V'halachla, and he went away. Someone that came into the Lishkas Hagazis and was inspected, and he found there was no psul found in him, he would dress himself in white clothing, or misatav levanim, wrap himself in white clothing, v'nichnas or mishamish echav hakainim, and he was able to go and join his brothers, the kainim, to do the aveda in the Beis Hamikdash. So these are all the rooms that were on the north. And here's the source of where we see that on the north there was this room of the Kohen Gadol that was called Lishkas Ha'etz, or was also called Lishkas Panhedrin. That was the sleeping quarters of the Kohen Gadol in these 7 days. Achas Badarim, but then there was another room on the Darim side where the Kohen Gadol spent his time during the day practicing the Ketairis. And the Gemara here brings, again, other Mishnahs in here. This is from Tamid and from Midas, where we'll see this other room in the Darim side. The Tnan, the Mishnah says, Shiva Sha'arim Hayu Ba'azara. There were 7 different gates that there were in the Azara. The Mishnah here goes through all these gates, and then at the end we'll see that there was a room near one of these gates. That was another room for the Kohen Gadol. Gimel Bat Safin, there were 3 entrances, 3 gateways entering into the Azara on Safin side. The Gimel B'Darim, there were 3 entrances on the Darim side of the Azara. Ve'echad B'Mizrach. And then there was 1 entrance on the Mizrach side. At the front of the Azara there was only 1 entrance. Shebedarim, what were the entrances on Darim side? Sharad Leika, the shar that was called the shar of the fire. Rashi actually says that he doesn't know why it was called this, but other Rishonim say that this is where they brought the fire for the Mizbeach. Sheni Loi, and then the second entrance, this is the entrance on the Darim side of the Azara. So the Mishnah here starts from what's closer to the Ma'ariv, and then the second one, closer to Mizrach, was Shar HaKarbon, was the shar that was called the shar that they brought in the karbanis from there. Again, Rashi says he doesn't know why it was called this, but other Rishonim say that this is the place where they brought the carbon tamid into every single day. Reason why Rashi says he doesn't know what this is, because this was on the Darim side, right? And the place where they shechted the karbanis was on the Tzafin side. So why would they bring the carbon tamid from the Darim side if they're shechting it on the complete opposite side of the Azara? So I saw one of the Mefarshim say, I think it's one of the Rishonim that says that spot was the place where Avraham Avinu came with Yitzchak to make the Akedah. So therefore, even though the Talmud shechted on the other side, they instituted to bring the carbon Talmud every single day from that spot to remind the Eibishter of the Akedah. Shlishi Loi, then the third entrance on the Darim side of the Azara was Shar HaMayim. The entrance, the water that was brought for the Nisach HaMayim on Sukkot was brought through there. Shebemizrach, then there was 1 gateway entrance on the Mizrach side, Shar Nikner. That's what was called Shar Nikner, a huge entrance right at the middle of the Mizrach of the Azara. Shtei Lishkas Hayu, there were 2 chambers on the side of this entrance. Sham Hayusham, Achas Bimina, 1 on the right, Vachas B'Smaila, 1 on the left. Achas Lishkas Pinchas HaMalabish, 1 was the room for Pinchas that had the clothing and would dress the Kainim. Va'achas Lishkas Oise Chavitin. On the other side, there was a chamber that was designated to make the Chavitin, which the Kohen Gadol, a carbon mincha that the Kohen Gadol had to bring every day. Shebetzafain, now going to the Tzafin side. There was another chamber on what are the entrances, that is? What are the entrances on the Tzafin side? Shar Nitzutz. There was a chamber called Shar Nitzutz, the spark. So some say the reason it was called this, maybe Rashi is the one that says it here, I don't think so. The reason why it was called Shar Nitzutz is because if the Mizbeach, the fire went out, so they would bring fire from there for the fire of the Mizbeach. Binyan Achsadre Hoya. So on this Shar, Shard Lake apparently was the materials that they brought for the fire, and here they brought the fire itself. Could be, not 100% sure. But this shar was actually different than all the other sha'arim. And what is that? And the Bach here adds one word. The kimin achsadre hoya. It was built like with a porch. The entranceway was built like with a porch on the top of it, right? Va'aliyah benuya loy al gabov. So below it was what's called an achsadra, which is like a pavilion. You enter into it, and then on top of it there's like a second floor, like a little porch. What was the purpose of this? V'sham kainim shemrim l'mayla. Kainim stood over there for the mitzvah of Shmiras HaMikdash. That was one of the places where the Kainim stood above, and Leviim Ulmata. And the Leviim stood over there below. Okay, now the Bach changes the girsa of the Gemara. Instead of what we have over here, you're supposed to read like it says in the Bach, Upesach Hoyaloi Lechel. And it had an opening going out into the Chel, which is the area right outside the Azara. Right outside the Azara, between the Azara and the Harabayis, there's an area called Chel. So this is one entrance in Safin. Sheni Loi, the second entrance on Safin is Shar HaKarbon. The Shar that the Karbonis were brought into from there, because all the Karbonis are shechter on Safin's side. Shlishi Loi. They were brought in on the other side, we said. So that was only the Carbon Tamid. Carbon Tamid was brought on the other side, according to one opinion. But all the other Karbonis were brought here on Safin's side. Shlishi Loi, a third entrance, Shar Beis HaMoiked. This is the Shar Beis HaMoiked, which we learned about before, which was really a massive room. And in that room itself, there were 4 chambers on the 4 corners. So that's the Mishnah where it speaks about the Sha'arim on the Gdarim and the Sha'arim on the Tzafim. These are the Mishnayos and Midas. Now on this, V'tanya, it says in the Braise, Chamesh Tvilois V'asara Kiddushin. There were 5 times that the Kohen had to go to the mikveh, and 10 times that the Kohen had to wash his hands and feet. Toivel Kohen Gadol u'Mekadesh Bei Bayayim. He had to toivel 5 times and wash his hands and feet on the day of Yom Kippur. Where was this done? The Kulam B'Kodesh Al Gag Beis HaParveh. So the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim is done from the Kier, so that we know is inside the Azara. But the mikveh that he used on Yom Kippur, he went upstairs above this Beis HaParveh, which is inside the Azara. That's where he went to the mikveh. Chutz Mizu.
The Kier was there?
No, the Kier was in the Azara, the mikveh. There was a mikveh over there. Chutz Mizu, besides the first time in the beginning of the day, Shahaisa B'Chayel, where then, when the Kohen Gadol went to the mikveh, he went to the mikveh in a mikveh that was outside of the Azara, at the opening of the Azara. I mean, the truth is that this is not only regarding the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur. Every Kohen that would come in to do the Aveda every day would come in from that area, from the Shara Mayim, and he would go to the mikveh over there, right outside the Azara, before he entered to do the Aveda. So the same thing, the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur, the first time he went to the mikveh in the beginning of the day was over there in this mikveh that was B'Chayel, outside the Azara. Where was that mikveh that we're talking about now, outside the Azara? Al Gabe Shar Amayim. It was on top of the entrance where we said before on the Darim side. The Darim side there was the Shar Amayim. And then here the Braisa adds Ubitzad Lishkasei Haisa. And this mikveh was situated right on the side of his chamber. So what do we see from this Braisa? There's a second room of the Kohen Gadol. Because before we said that there's a chamber of the Kohen Gadol that's called Lishkas Ha'etz or Lishkas Parhedrin. Actually, we'll see, the Gemara will explain now. But there was one chamber of the Kohen Gadol that was on the Tzafin side. And now we're saying that by the Shar Amayim, which was on the Darim side, there was also B'tzad Lishkas, so there was another chamber over there, and that's where the Kohen Gadol went to the mikveh. Okay, but now...
And there's 2 mikveh.
So there's 2 mikvahs, correct? There's one mikveh on top of Beis HaParveh, inside the Azara, and another one by the Shar HaMayim, which was built outside of the Azara. But now the Gemara will explain which room was on which side. So there were 2 rooms. One room where the Kohen slept over there, and there's another room where the Kohen was practicing his Aveda of the Ketores. So which room was on Tzafin, which room was on Darim? V'lo Yadaina, and it says, I don't know, it's not clear, Ilishkas Parhedrin B'Tzafin, is the Lishkas Parhedrin where the Kohen lived and slept there, was that on Tzafin's side? V'Lishkas Beis of Tinis, and the room, the chamber where the Kohen did the Aveda of the Ketores was B'Darim, on the Darim side. Or maybe it was the opposite. Lishkas Beis of Tinis was B'Tzafin, and V'Lishkas Parhedrin was B'Darim. Now the Gemara will prove what it was. Mistavre, now it would be logical to say the Lishkas Parhedrin B'Darim, that the room where the Kohen Gadol slept, that was on the B'Darim Avoy, was on the Darim side. My time, what's the reason? So the Gemara here will explain, it's just more convenient, it makes more sense not to cause the Kohen Gadol to have to walk extra, that it would be on the Darim side. Why? So the Gemara explains what the schedule of the Kohen Gadol in these 7 days when he was separated there was. So Makdim Koi, he wakes up early in the morning, Umeisachas Raglov, and he would go to the bathroom, and then Vitovel. Then he would go to the mikveh. So where does he go to the mikveh? By the Shar HaMayim. So that's on the Darim side. V'azil L'tzofen, and then from there he would walk to the Tzofen side, and V'gomar Chafina, he would go into the other chamber that was designated for him, the base of Tinis, and there he would learn the Avodah of Chafina, the Avodah of the Ketores. And then during the day, what would the Kohen Gadol do? V'asi leBeis HaMikdash, he came into the Beis HaMikdash, V'avad Avodah Kula Yoma, he would participate in the Avodah the entire day. We learned this before in the Mishnah. It said that the Kohen Gadol for these 7 days would participate in the Avodah to train him into the Avodah. LeBahadi Panya, then before evening, Madu Alei, they would spray on him from the Para Aduma. Right, as we mentioned before, every single one of the 7 days they would spray on him from the Para Aduma. And then V'hadar Azal Darim, he would have to go back to the Darim side, which is where the Shar HaMayim is, V'tovel, and there he would go to the mikveh by the Shar HaMayim, and we learned this before, that after they spray on him from the Para Aduma, he has to go to the mikveh, because if he's tahir, spraying on him the waters of the Para Aduma actually made him tameh. So he would have to go to the mikveh, and then V'nayach. And then it's very convenient. Right over there on the Darim side is where the Lishkas Parhedrin is, and he goes to sleep right over there. He doesn't have to walk back to the other side of the Azara to go to sleep. So according to this, we understand that the Lishkas Parhedrin was on the Darim side, and the Lishkas Beis of Tinis, where he did his work during the day with the Ketores, was on the Tzafna side. And Gemara says the Yomret, if you're going to say it was the opposite, Lishkas Parhedrin was B'tzafn. The place where the Kohen Gadol lived, where he slept, was on the Tzafna side, so then he's going to have to walk extra. For the first half of the day, actually, it's not going to be a problem. But for the night, when he goes to sleep, he's going to have to walk back on the other side, as the Gemara explains now. Makdim Kai wakes up early in the morning, and Meisach Raglav, he goes to the bathroom, and then V'azal Darim, he's going to have to walk from the Tzafin side to the Darim side, V'tovel, and there he goes to the mikveh, V'gomar Chafina, and there he's going to learn the Avodah of the Ketores, which is going to be there on the Darim side, near where the water is, near where he went to the mikveh. Then V'azal Beis HaMikdash, he goes into the Beis HaMikdash, V'avad Avodah Kula Yoma, and he does the Avodah all day. Lahadi Panya, then before evening, Madu Alei, they spray him from the Para Aduma. V'hada Azal Darim, and then he has to go to the Darim, V'tavel, he has to go to the mikveh at night. And now, if you're going to say that the room of his dwelling, Lishkas Parhedrin, was on the other side in Tzafin, he's going to have to walk all the way back to the other side of the Azara, to Tzafin side, to go to sleep. Umeinach, and there he can go to sleep. So the point is, would we want him to have this extra exertion, to have to walk all the way back to the other side to go to sleep? So therefore, it makes sense to say that the Lishkas Parhedrin was right over there on Darim side, where the Shar HaMayim was, and where the mikveh that the Kohen Gadol toiveled at night was. So he shouldn't have to walk back at night. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya. This is why why don't we want him to have this extra exertion? There's actually a point to this. Again, why don't we want him to have an extra exertion? The eat tzedaki who, and the point there is, if he's a tzedaki, so lifresh, he's going to see 7 days, he's walking back and forth, and even at night it's late and he goes to the mikveh and he has to walk all the way back. We want him to have extra tirche, so if he's a tzedaki, he'll say, this is too hard for me, and he won't do the Aveda. Inami, or even if he's a tzaddik, to make him work extra in order that he shouldn't have a haughty heart and be a balgaiv in what he's doing. Gemara adds even more than this, if you're not going to say this point here, that we want him to have an extra tirche, why not make these two rooms right near each other? The room where he sleeps and the room where he practices the ketores, make them one right near each other. He shouldn't have to walk at all anywhere. Inami tesagile b'chad, or how about it being in the same room, one room with a bed there, and then also a place for him to practice the ketores. So the fact that there's two rooms on both sides of the Azara proves that we want the Kohen Gadol to walk back and forth and to work hard. So therefore, the conclusion is that there's no raya that the Lishkas Parhedrin was on Darim side. And actually the Rambam, and the way it's al-Halacha, the way they designs the Lishkas Parhedrin was on the Tzafin side, and the Lishkas Beis of Tinis was on the Darim side.
In the beginning?
Huh?
In the beginning, man. Yoma,
that it was on the Tzafin side, right. So here's the source where the Gemara brings it and explains it.
Was a walk from one side of the base?
I'm not sure exactly the distance. What did we say? It was 135 amas. So I was saying it's not that long. 135 amas is how many feet? Okay.
Even if it's 250.
Yeah. Sagt the Gemara, the next thing in the mission, what did it say? V'amru lai ishi kohen gadol v'chulu. They would tell him, my master, the kohen gadol, that we are the shluchim of the bezdin, and you are our shliach, and the shliach of the bezdin, and they would make a shvu with him. So the Mishnah uses this expression that they tell him that you're our shliach to do the avodah, and you're the shliach of the bezdin. Says the Gemara, Leime to have it to yufte that Ravuna Bereder of Yeshua. So the expression that it says here in the Mishnah refutes Ravuna Bereder of Yeshua's opinion. Ravuna Bereder of Yeshua, Hani Kani, the Kayanim of the Beis HaMikdash. Shluchei the Rachmane Nino. It must be that they are shluchim, they are sent to do the Aveda from the Eibishter. We're not the ones that send them. There's a discussion, Rashi here quotes from the Gemara and the Darim. The Kayanim that do the Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash, who are they doing it for? Who is the Mishaleach that's sending them to be the shluchim to do it? Are they doing it for the Eibishter, shluchim of the Eibishter, or are they sent by us, Yidden, to do the shlichus for this Aveda? And Rashi says the difference would be, what happens if there's one Yid that made a neder not to have any benefit of a certain Kayin? Could that Kayin do the Aveda for this Yid? Mm-hmm. If the shluchah the Rachmana, if the Kayin is doing the shlichus for the Eibishter, so then he can do it for you. But if the Kayin is doing the Aveda as a shlichus for you, so then the Kayin can't do the Aveda for you. So Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yeshua said that the Kayinim are shluchah the Rachmana. And Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yeshua explained why it must be this way. If you're going to say that the Kayinim are shluchim of the Yidden, is there something that we ourselves cannot do and we could send a shliach that could do it? The cloud by shlichus always is, a mishaleach could only send someone to do a shlichus in his place. If he himself could do it, then he could send someone else to do it in his place. So we can't do that in the Beis HaMikdash. So how can we say that the Kayanim would be our shluchim and would be in our place? That was the raya of Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yeshua. But the question though is, that's what it says in our Mishnah here. In the Mishnah here, it clearly says that they tell the Kohen Gadol, Ato shelucheinu shliach bezdin. You are our shliach. So the Mishnah does refer to the Kohen Gadol as our shliach. So the Gemara answers, Hachi ka'amrile. Now we have to understand the Mishnah differently. Mashbi'in anu alecha, we are having you take an oath that you're going to do the Aveda properly, al dateinu val das bezdin, based on the purpose of what we're sending you for, and the das of the bezdin. So when the Mishnah uses the term shlichus, it doesn't really mean shlichus in this sense that you are our shliach. Really, you're the Eibish's shliach. But what the Mishnah is saying is, when a person makes a shvuah, so the Kohen Gadol could be making a shvuah, and he'll have in mind whatever he's thinking with his shvuah, and he's not going to think the thing of the shvuah, that what we want him to think. So what we're telling him is, you're making the shvuah based on what we want to send you for. According to our opinion, what we want it to be for. That's what the Lashon Shlichus over here means. Really just our opinion, but not really the union of Shlichus, because we can still say, like Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yeshua, that the Kohen Gadol is the Shliach of the Eibishter. The next thing it said in the Mishnah is, Hu Peirishu Beiche, Vem Peirishnu Beichen. After they would make the Shvuah with him, he would cry and they would cry. Hu Peirishu Beiche, the Gemara explains, why would he cry? Shechashduhu, that they suspected him that Tzdaiki, that he's a Tzdaiki. And then they would cry, anybody that suspects someone, that's really someone that's kosher, he gets harmed, the Eibishter punishes him in his body. And Rashi brings the source and what you find by Moshe Rabbeinu. When he said about the Yidden, Hein lo yaminuli, the Yidden are not going to believe me. So what happened? Moshe Rabbeinu became a mitzayra as kashelek. So therefore they would cry that they were chayshah this Kohen Gadol. V'kol kach lama, why is it so important that he should make this shvuah? Answer is, Shelo yisakin mi bachotz v'yachnes. He shouldn't prepare the ketayres outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim and bring it inside. Kederech shatzadaikim oisen, like the tzadaikim do. We'll see in a moment, the Gemara is going to describe this, but basically, there's two ways how you can make the ketayres. As I mentioned in the beginning, the ketayres, the Kohen Gadol comes into the Beis HaMikdash holding two things in his hands. In one hand, he's holding a pan of hot coals, fire. On another hand, he's holding the ketayres. So one way how to do it is, and this is what the tzaddikim said, that you have to put the ketayres on the pan of the fire and create the smoke, the onon, outside, and that's how you enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, with the smoke already coming out. According to the Chachamim, that's not the pshat and the psukim. The way it's done is, you walk into the Kodesh HaKadoshim separated, the pan in one hand and the ketayres in another hand. In the Kodesh HaKadoshim is where you have to take the ketayres and place it onto the pan of fire. The Gemara brings a story about this now. Tana Rabbanan, there was a story, Maisa b'tzedeki yecha, there was a story with one tzedeki that was a kohen gadol, shehiskim b'chutz, he prepared the ketaitis on the outside, v'hichnes, and he brought it inside. B'yitziyase, when he came out, hayasameach, simcha gedayla, he was very excited that he did it the way he thought was right. Paga b'yaviv, his father met him amalai, and he said to his son, B'ni, my son, afapishet tzteikim anu, even though we are tzteikim, and this is how we interpret the psukim, and we say, and therefore you're happy that you did it the way you thought is right, but misyaran anam min aprushim, we're afraid maybe the prushim are right, and don't be so excited that you did it the way you did it. Amalai, so his son tells him, Kol yameh yisim mitztayir ala mikra zeh. My entire lifetime I had pain. I was thinking about this pasuk. This is the way that tzaddikim interpreted this pasuk. What was the basis of their understanding? Because the pasuk says, Ki ba'anan eiroeh ala kapayres. How do I appear by the kapayres? How do you appear in the Kodesh HaKadoshim with an anan, with the smoke, with the cloud? Meaning they held that you placed the kapayres on the fire before, so you come in and the cloud is already there. Amarti, I said, when will I have the opportunity to do it in this way? Now that I had the opportunity to do this, I shouldn't do it this way. I shouldn't be. So he was excited that he did this. Amru, they said, it didn't pass many days until this kohen gadol that was at Stoiki and did it this way died. And not only that, he was thrown into a garbage dump. And there were teilaim, worms that were coming out of his nose. And Rashi explains the reason is because when you enter in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, what's the first part of your body that enters into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? The nose of the person. Right? So therefore, the nose sticks out, so that's the first one that enters. So therefore, he entered into the Kodesh HaKadoshim in an inappropriate way, so the teilaim were coming out of his nose. But this is the pshat. Okay, this is the pshat that Rashi says.
If they knew that he was a Zduki, why?
Well, so apparently they didn't know, right? So he passed. I mean, they made a shavua with him, but he made a false shavua, and then he was a tzedeki. Yeah, and as I said, the second base of Mikdash, they would pay money to be the kohen gadol. Others say that the end of the story was different. As he was coming out, nigif, he was harmed right over there. And what happened to him? The Tani Rab Chia said what happened was Kimin Koil Nishma Ba'azara. There was a loud noise that was heard outside in the Azara. Shabah Malach, a Malach came, v'choftei al panov, and he banged him on his face. V'nichnasu echav ha'kainim, and the kainim heard this big noise, and they came inside. Umatzu kekaf regel egel, they saw like the print or the mark of the sole of a foot of a calf, ben seifov, between his shoulders. And this was the print or the mark of the foot of the malach that pushed him. Shenema, the pasuk says regarding the malachim, v'ragleim regel yishara, their feet are straight, v'kaf ragleim, the sole of their feet, kekaf regel egel. It was like the foot of an egel, of a calf. So this is a story with a tztoiki that did the ketaitis in the Beis HaMikdash, not the way it was supposed to. The next thing we learned in the Mishnah was that the reason why his nose, okay, that's another pshat, the reason why the worms came out of his nose because the smoke that he smelled was not proper. Okay, very good. So that's another pshat. The next thing it said in the Mishnah was Amar Rab Zcharia ben Kavutal. Rab Zcharia ben Kavutal said this was regarding the reading for the kohenim at night, the kohen gadol that is. So Rab Zcharia ben Kavutal said that he read Sefer Daniel for the kohen gadol. So here the Gemara brings a side subject, very interesting, regarding the name. So Masnila Rav Chanan bar Abba lechiyah barav kamei de Rav, when Rav Chanan bar Abba was teaching this incident in front of Rav, so he said, so Amar Rab Zcharia ben Kavutal, he repeated it and then he said the name with a fei, Rab Zcharia ben Kavutal. Umachvile Rav biyodei. So Rav motioned with his hand that he's saying it wrong, and he motioned some way to correct him that it's kavuta with a vase. So the Gemara asks, why did Rav motion with his hands? Why didn't he tell him? Answers the Gemara, Kriyashma avakari. He was in the middle of saying Kriyashma, so he didn't want him to interrupt. Frek the Gemara, and if he was in the middle of saying Kriyashma, are you allowed to motion with your hands and to correct him? When you're reading Shema, la yirmas be'einav, don't make any signs with your eyes, la yikreitz b'sifsaisav, no signals with your lips, v'la yayre be'etz baisav, and don't make any signs with your hands either. V'tanya Rab Elazar chismayim, the same thing, akayre Shema, umerames be'einav, and you do make a hint with your eyes, or umekaretz b'sifsaisav, you make a signal with your lips, umara be'etz bay, you show with your hands, with your fingers, olav akasavayim, the pasuk says, v'loy oisi karasa Yaakov, and you did not call out to me. because you're busy making signals to other things. So how could Rav do this in the middle of Kriya Shema? So the Gemara answers like Kashya. Only in the first parsha of Shema are you not allowed to make any signal. But in the second you are. So over here, Divrei Torah, he wanted to show what the right name is. It was only in the second parsha of Shema, and he's allowed to make the signal. So now in connection to this, the Gemara brings a brayse. Tana Rabbanan. Yes.
Yeah?
I believe so. Tana Rabbanan, it says in the brayse, V'dibarta bam. What do we learn out from this? That it says, V'dibarta bam, you should speak in this. You should speak words of Torah. Bam v'loy b'tfilah. Only this you should speak and not tefillah. What does this mean? Rashi explains, V'dibarta bam means when you say Kriya Shema, you should say the words of Kriya Shema loud. When you say the bracha of Shmei Nesre, tefillah, so over there you speak low. That's Rashi's pshat. Taisus' pshat is, V'dibarta bam v'loy b'tfilah means that in middle of Shmei Nesre, over there, you're not allowed to interrupt at all. Even if a king comes and he asks you and he's greeting you, you're not allowed to respond to him at all. And even a snake that's in your vicinity, you're not allowed to make any interruption. Whereas in Kriya Shema, there are certain cases where you're allowed to make interruption. That's the bam v'loy b'tfilah. The difference. So the two pshatim of what's the difference between Kriya Shema and the Shmei Nesra. Another pshat brayse says v'dibarta bam yesh l'cha reshus l'daber v'loy b'dvarim acherim. That you have reshus to speak words of Torah, but you shouldn't speak any other words besides Torah. So in other words, a person should, Rashi says, what is dvarim acherim? Sichas hayoladim v'kalas reish, just frivolous talk or other child talk. A person should not occupy his time with that. If he has time, he should use it to speak words of Torah. Rav Acha has another pshat. V'dibarta bam, what does this mean? Asay oisin kva. Make the words of Torah that you learn permanent. Valtasim aray. And the words of Torah that you learn should not be temporary. Rava said, Hasach sichas chulin, a person that speaks mundane and other kinds of things, and not words of Torah that he has an opportunity to learn. Oive be'esa. Yoiva, and this I say, Shenema v'dibarta bam v'lei b'dvarim acherim. You should speak words of Torah and not other things. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, Oiver belav, that you're over on a lav if you speak other words. Shenemar kol advarim yegeim la yuchal ish ledaber. All the other things that a person speaks about that are yegeim, that are not necessary, a person should not speak them. So therefore, you're over belav. It doesn't literally mean a lav because this is a pasuk in Koheles. So over here, when you look in this brayse, there are two opinions brought over here regarding v'dibarta bam, what it refers to. The Tanna Kama says it tells you to speak bam, to speak words of Torah, and not to speak other words that are not necessary. And then Rav Acha says that you should make the Torah kva and not aray. So it seems like it's a machlokes. It seems like that Rav Acha has no problem with a person speaking dvarim acherim. That's why he argues with the Tanna Kama. He brings a different drasha. So is this true? The Rav Acha bar Yaakov holds, Rav Acha bar Yaakov holds that you could speak other words even besides divrei Torah when you have an opportunity to learn Torah. So there's a sikha from the Rebbe where the Rebbe explains a very interesting pshat in this Gemara, that really when it says dvarim acherim in the brayse, there's two different ways that you could interpret what dvarim acherim means. Rashi says dvarim acherim refers to sichas hayoladim v'kalas reish. That's the Tanna Kama's opinion. But the truth is that within Torah itself there's also dvarim acherim. Why? Because Torah is divided into two parts. There's the halachis, the mitzvahs of the Torah, and then there's all the stories of the Torah. That's what's called dvarim acherim. In the Tanna Kama's opinion, when it says in the Torah, v'dibarta bam, the mitzvah of limud Torah includes all parts of Torah, mitzvahs of the Torah, the stories of the Torah, and therefore when we exclude dvarim acherim, it's coming to exclude only sichas hayoladim v'kalas reish. Therefore he said that that's the drasha v'loy b'dvarim acherim. But according to Rav Acha, when the Torah says v'dibarta bam, the mitzvah of limud Torah refers mainly to learning about the mitzvahs of the Torah, the halachas of the Torah. So we can't exclude dvarim acherim. Dvarim acherim would refer even to the stories of the Torah. So therefore he says another pshat that it refers to making the words of Torah permanent, which means when you learn Torah, there are two parts of Torah. Learning the mitzvahs and the halachas of the Torah, that should be a more permanent part of learning Torah, and whereas the dvarim acherim of Torah, which means the stories of Torah, is also important to learn, but it doesn't have to be as kva as the stories of Torah, as the mitzvahs of Torah that you learn. That's what Rebbe's pshat in this Gemara. Okay, we'll stop over here. There's no, isn't there?